I teach this principle often. God blesses you in response to faithfulness and obedience. His word is also clear that unfaithfulness and disobedience disqualify you from his blessing. We find this principle in Malachi chapter 3. Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. And you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. You're under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you're robbing me. It's very clear. If you are unfaithful and disobey God, you rob God and choose to live outside his blessing. Verse 10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. There may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I won't throw open the floodgates of heaven, pour out so much blessing, you won't have room enough for it. If you're faithful and obey God, you can expect blessing. Now look at Deuteronomy chapter 11. Again, the Lord is speaking. See, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey the commands of the Lord your God I'm giving you today. The curse if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I command you today. Obey God and blessing follows, right? One more verse. This time the words of Jesus in Luke chapter 6. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Again, when you're faithful and generous in how you treat others, you can expect to be blessed. That is a consistent pattern in Scripture. But what do you do when it goes the other way? How do you respond when you've been faithful and things still go wrong? You're active in church, involved in ministry, living for God, then you get a bad report from the doctor. And you ask yourself, how can this be? I've been faithful. You tithe, even give to missions. Then you find out your company is downsizing and you're one of the layoffs. Why is this happening to me? I've been faithful. You're generous, caring, and loving. In response to that, you've been backstabbed and abandoned by a supposedly Christian friend. And you ask yourself, why me? You're doing your best to follow God and his plan for your life, but other people take advantage of you, causing hurt and pain. And you wonder, why me, God? Did I do something wrong? Why now? You're an attentive wife, a responsible husband, a loving parent. Now you've discovered your spouse is having an affair. God, why me? How could this be happening to me? I've been so faithful. We don't enjoy talking about this. It's not a fun topic. We want the Christian life to function as a predictable formula. I do this, God does this. No surprises, no setbacks, just a straight line up that ends in heaven. The faithful and obedient reap the blessings constantly and continually. That's how many Christians believe, right up until they encounter a challenge or a difficult circumstance. When someone abandons you, you get sick, you lose your job, your spouse has an affair, your parents get a divorce, that's when your faith and your faithfulness is really challenged. Before we look at today's story, I want to consider the theological question: when you suffer and things go wrong, is that automatically punishment or correction from God? Some of you have been taught that sickness is because you don't have enough faith. Heartache is because you weren't faithful. Financial challenges are because you don't give enough. When people hurt you, even though they did it, you must have done something to deserve it. If you were following God and being obedient, it wouldn't happen. That theology is not scriptural. In fact, it's spiritual abuse. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. Not you might have trouble, or you won't have trouble, you will. It's part of living in this world. Problems are going to happen. When sin entered the world through Adam and Eve, sickness, suffering, and death was introduced to mankind. So as long as we live on this earth, we will have trouble. Jesus made that very, very clear. We've been looking at the life of Joseph. Joseph was his father's favorite son, which made his brothers really mad. To make it worse, Joseph had a dream he shared with his brothers that he never should have shared. In the dream, Joseph was the ruler and his brothers bowed down to him. And as those of you with siblings can imagine, didn't go very well. Joseph's brothers were mean and vindictive. Since they hated him and his stupid dream, they decided to kill him, to kill their own brother. Then at the last moment, one of them spoke up. They changed their minds. Instead of killing their brother, they sold him as a slave. Joseph was sold, resold, finally ended up in Egypt working for a high-level government official named Potiphar. Joseph was faithful and obedient. Potiphar, everyone else in his household, recognized that God was with Joseph. Joseph rose through the ranks and he became Potiphar's most trusted servant, leading the whole household. Joseph was blessed in response to his faithfulness, and then things went wrong. Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph and repeatedly attempted to seduce him. In an awesome display of faithfulness, Joseph resisted the temptation and stayed true to God. No matter what Mrs. Potiphar did, Joseph stood strong. And as a result, Potiphar gave Joseph his freedom and bought him a mansion with a swimming pool. That's what you expect, right? Joseph was faithful and obedient in resisting temptation. His blessing must have been amazing. Not so much. Potiphar believed the accusations and was angry. Instead of rewarding Joseph for his faithfulness with a mansion, Potiphar threw Joseph in prison. Up till now, you can kind of see the hand of God in this story. Joseph was sold, but ended up leading a powerful household. God was positioning him for the future, but now the dream was dead. Hope was gone. Joseph sat in a prison cell, not for disobedience, pride, or arrogance, but for obeying God, resisting temptation, and doing right. This is the most extreme opposite of Joseph's dream imaginable. Joseph was not leading and ruling, he was wasting it away in a dungeon of hopelessness and despair. No way out, done. It looked likely his dream would never come true, that instead Joseph would spend the rest of his life in prison. We don't know how Joseph spent his time in prison. We don't know what he said or what he prayed because the Bible doesn't tell us. But you can imagine your prayers in that situation. God, thanks a lot. I resist temptation, and this is what I get. This is what I get for being faithful and obeying you. Prison, sure glad I obeyed. I've given money. I've given time. Thanks a lot, God. If this is the reward for obedience, I can do without it. I loved you. I served you. I was faithful. Now, where are you? Do you really love me? Are you even there? God, this is not what I signed up for. I'm not getting the results I wanted or expected. I did right and got this. Why serve you, God? I'm done. You've heard the stories. This is the reason people leave church, leave faith, give up on God, and abandon their dreams. Because being faithful didn't pay off. Or so it seems. Prison instead of the palace was a prime opportunity for Joseph to give up on God and abandon his dream. Joseph had a choice to make. You have the same choice. When things don't go your way, when they don't turn out as expected, you have to decide, Will you abandon God and give up on your dreams? Or will you continue to be faithful even when it doesn't seem to be paying off? This is what we talked about at the deepening this week, Wednesday night at the deepening. What kind of commitment are you going to make? Are you going to make a commitment that only is good in the good times? Are you going to make a commitment that will survive persecution and hardship and struggle? We pick up Joseph's story in Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king, the cupbearer of the king, that's the dude that drinks whatever the king drinks before the king drinks it to make sure it's not poisoned. In those days, that was a popular way to kill kings. And so you had a cupbearer that drank the Kool-Aid first, and then you watched, and if they fall over dead, you don't drink it. Okay? And the baker, we all know what bakers do. They bake. Bakers have a special place in the heart of the king and the pastor. Somehow, this cupbearer and the baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. We don't know what they did. Somehow he's angry. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. Once again, Joseph was put in a position of authority. When two of Pharaoh's officials were put in prison, Joseph was the guy who was put in charge of them. Joseph had a dream. He had a promise from God. Right now, that dream didn't look very possible, but Joseph knew that his circumstances did not negate the call of God on his life. Joseph, in spite of being in prison for doing right, kept doing right. The lesson is, even when things are going wrong, keep doing right. Didn't turn out the way you expected. Doesn't seem fair. Don't give up. Keep doing right. Remember Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. I know it looks like your dream will never come to pass. Keep doing right. You might just be in the center of God's plan, right there in your prison cell. After they'd been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer, the baker, the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. Each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" Instead of getting down in the dumps and feeling sorry for himself, Joseph saw prison as another opportunity to serve God. Joseph had no reason to believe that these men could help him in any way. They've been rejected, kicked out, and put in prison. So why care about them, and who cares if they are sad? But Joseph recognized they were hurting, and he knew God had called him to serve others. So many people, when they find themselves in an adverse situation, especially one they didn't create, wait for someone to comfort them. It is tempting to throw a pity party when things don't go well. You wallow in self-pity and you sink into depression. We learn from Jesus and we learn from Joseph, even in the prison circumstances of life, when things are going horribly wrong, put others first. You fight self-pity by caring for others. One of the things I often pray for people in the hospital, and there's no doubt some of you have heard me pray this over you, is, Lord, we are open to the possibility that even in this really frustrating time, there will be someone who walks in this room who needs something from you. Help my friend today to be sensitive and to be tuned in, to be alert to the needs of others. I pray that doctors and nurses, even people who come in the room to clean, would sense something different about this patient and would sense the hope and the joy they have. And God, somehow, even though they never planned to be here, use this moment for your kingdom and for your glory. Notice the people around you. Be sensitive to their needs. It could be they are the purpose for your prison. You say, hold on, Pastor Rod. What'd you say? Someone else could be the purpose for my prison? Would God do that? Would God allow you to endure difficult circumstances in order to reach others? Would God let you go through pain and suffering in order to be a witness and bring someone to Him? Well, that's what God did at the cross. Jesus endured horrific suffering, went through pain and agony so we could be saved. Several years ago, I had a friend, pastor friend, whose kidneys failed. It was one of those circumstances. He was young and faithful. It didn't seem right. It didn't seem fair. He had to go to dialysis twice a week. And in that room, in the prison of dialysis, he discovered his opportunity. He was surrounded by people who were frightened, depressed, dejected, and afraid. He spent several hours twice a week with people who'd given up on their life and their dreams. He told me, Pastor Rod, it's awesome. He said, we're all hooked up to machines and no one can go anywhere, no one can leave. They are a captive audience. And his dialysis machine became his pulpit. He preached, he prayed, he led people to Jesus. He actually found himself looking forward to dialysis. He told me, God showed me my mission field. These people are hurting. Would God do that? Would God let my friend endure kidney failure in order to bring people to the kingdom? Take advantage of your opportunity and serve them. Share your faith. Talk about the love of Jesus. When you keep doing right and you put others first, two things will happen. First, you will minister to others. Second, you will discover that no circumstance can destroy God's dream. You'll find your purpose and fulfillment in the middle of your worst circumstance. You say, do you really believe that, Rod? I do. Absolutely. I've discovered that when things are going wrong, when I'm under attack, that's when God seems most likely to put people in my path that need His love and grace. When I focus on them, my own issues get a lot smaller. God uses me to reach them. God uses them to keep me from the trap of self-pity. Back to the cupbearer and the baker. They said, we both had bad dreams. There's no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Joseph experienced success in Potiphar's house, was trusted in prison. Joseph could have been arrogant and thought, I'm the man. But his immediate response to this man was, God is the one who can help interpret dreams, not me. And with God's help, Joseph accurately interpreted the dreams. Exactly what Joseph predicted happened. In the middle of your most difficult situation, when it seems like faithfulness is not paying off, remember, God is your source. The business that is struggling is not your source and never was your source. Your boss is not your source and never was. Your position or your paycheck is not your source. That relationship is not your source. That doctor is not your source. God is your source. You get discouraged when it seems like there's no way out. Remember, God has an unlimited supply. People who understand that have no trouble with tithing. If everything I have comes from God, He can have whatever He wants. The last thing I want to do is tick off my source. Knowing God is your source gives you a completely different perspective on problems. Paul, who did some pretty amazing things for God, talks about everything he went through, beatings, shipwrecks, prison, and said these light momentary afflictions don't compare to what God has for us. No matter how difficult your circumstance, God is not intimidated. His plan for your dream and life is still intact. In fact, those moments when it seems over are when you best learn to rely on your Heavenly Father. Looking back on all those moments, the shipwrecks, the beatings, the prison, all that stuff, in 2 Corinthians, here's what Paul wrote. We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. We thought we would never live through it. In fact, we expected to die. But as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and we learned to rely only on God. We learned total dependence on God. Our hard times, Paul called them light, momentary afflictions, they taught us again that God is our source. And through it all, through everything that happened, through all the horrible stuff, through all the hard times, through all the difficulties, what we learned was to trust in God.
Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. And I've had many tears and sorrows, and I've had questions for tomorrow. And there have been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in every situation, God gave blessed consolation. My trials only come to make me strong. And I thank God for the mountains, and I thank Him for the valleys, and I thank Him for the times He's brought me through. For if I never had a problem, I wouldn't know that God could solve them. Oh, I wouldn't know what faith in God can do. Come on, sing through it all. Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. I thank God for the mountains. I thank Him for the valleys, and I thank Him for the times He's brought me through. Oh, 'cause if I never had a problem, I wouldn't know that God could solve them. Oh, I wouldn't know what faith in God can do. Sing through it all, through it all, through it all. I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Sing through it all, through it all, yeah. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. Say, I've learned to depend upon His word. I've learned to depend upon His word.
Sing that verse one more time, Tim.
mountains.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus.
I thank him for the valleys, and I thank him for the times he's brought me through.
Thank you, Jesus.
For if I never had a problem,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that God could solve them. I wouldn't know what faith in God can do.
Would you sing it with me? Through it all.
Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God.
That's why I say through
It all,
Through it all, I've learned to depend on His word. Sit down for just a moment. When you face hard times and struggles, even though you've been faithful, keep doing right. Look for opportunities to reach out. Remember, God is your source. You can trust Him. I want to finish this message with one of my favorite verses of Scripture, Psalm 34:19. You're not going to like the first half, but you're going to love the second half. The first half says, a righteous man may have many troubles. You say, well, that doesn't seem fair. If I'm righteous, should say a righteous man doesn't have any troubles. It says a righteous man may have many troubles. But listen to the second part. But the Lord delivers him from them all. From them all. Trouble may come, but you have a promise that the Lord's going to deliver you.
Thank you for joining us for another great service at First and LR. I'm honored that you have set aside part of your week to be with us. If you enjoy watching the service, you'll love it even more in person. We would love for you to come and spend a weekend in a service with us and introduce yourself in the guest center. You can learn more about service times and other ways to connect at firstnlr.com. I'm praying that today's message speaks to you, and I'm believing for God to do marvelous things in your life. Thanks for watching. What an incredible service. Thank you for joining us and being a part of our church family. If you have any questions about today's service, if you need prayer, or if you just want to learn more about First and LR, go to firstnlr.com or follow us on social media at First and LR. Our goal is for you to be a lifelong follower of Jesus. And I pray that the Lord would bless and guide you as you obediently follow what He has for you and your family. We look forward to connecting with you.